1985, Danny Sullivan started 8th but quickly dropped back. At one point, he was just seconds away from being lapped. But Sullivan patiently worked his way to the front of the pack and challenged for the lead. Then on lap 120, attempting to pass front-runner Mario Andretti, he spun, regained control, and eventually passed Andretti to win at Indy for the first time. Hello, I'm Bob Jenkins. Danny Sullivan came to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in 1982 with little fanfare and a background in road racing. With a flair for the dramatic and an inner drive to make it to the top, his career has soared. His spin in 1985 and a practice crash that put him in a cast for the '89 race provided memorable highlights for this talented driver known for his control. A driver who has made his mark at the Indy 500. A race for heroes. Louisville, Kentucky native Danny Sullivan made his first to Indy as a spectator in 1968.
I went one time to Indianapolis in 1968, and we were one of the, crazies out in the infield. We didn't really watch the race that much. We went up there the same way as a lot of people came down to the Kentucky Derby. It was like a happening. It was the place to be, and it was a good party, and it was a fun time.
Bobby Unser 68 race, a race that also featured three-time winner A.J. Foyt, as well as future Indy winners Mario Andretti, Al Unser, Gordon Johncock, and Johnny Rutherford. At the time, Sullivan had no idea that in 15 years he would compete against those same drivers. But in 1971, Sullivan decided to try auto racing, despite some strong discouragement from a longtime family friend.
I said, well, I'm going to do it anyway, not having a clue how I would do it or where I was going to go or anything. And he said, well, that's what I was afraid of, so we'll make a deal. And I'll send you to driving school, which was in England, the Jim Russell School. And that was on the advice of Jackie Stewart. And so he said, we'll send you there. If you do well, and they say you do well, not on your opinion, but they say you do well, you can continue. But the minute you stop racing, return to college.
Sullivan completed his driving school and took a job with Ken Tyrrell's Grand Prix team that featured Jackie Stewart. After 11 years of European road racing and the Can-Am circuit, Sullivan was ready to take the ultimate challenge. He was ready for Indy in 1982. A lot had changed since the '68 race, but some of the names were the same. But Sullivan was more concerned about his own performance.
There's so much buildup, and it's not like a road race where you just go get in the car and you go out and they got the watches on you and you pull in, make an adjustment, go back out. And the other thing different is the races that I had done previous to that in IndyCar racing, which were just a couple, I had gone out and done 1 or 2 laps in qualifying. But Indy, it's a 4-lap run. I mean, it's 10 miles and it's a long run. It's a lot easier to hold your breath for 1 or 2 laps on a short oval than it is to, for 10 miles around a place like the Speedway.
Sullivan made a strong run, qualifying 13th. His next big hurdle would come on race day. For anyone who has witnessed the Indy 500 in person, it is truly a spectacle. With the festive atmosphere, the tradition, and the color, race day morning is difficult to capture with words.
It's a feeling that you can't describe to anybody. And I think for me, it was even more special because I had never been to Indy except that one time when I was out in the infield. So I hadn't even gone there as a young up-and-coming driver and been there for race day and had a pass and kind of walked out there and known the feeling without actually going out into a car. So for me, it was really special to walk out there the first time. And this is the first time I'm actually at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and I'm going out to get in my car to start a race. Yeah, I was pretty nervous, to say the least.
Coming down for the green flag, Kevin Cogan veered into A.J. Foyt, starting a 5-car accident that delayed his first ever Indy start. With the track cleared and 4 cars eliminated, the race was restarted. Not affected by the excitement of the morning, Sullivan quickly moved into the top 10. By the halfway mark, an intense two-man race between Gordon Johncock and Rick Mears had developed, and Sullivan was still running in the top 10. 8th position, but several laps off the pace, Sullivan crashed on the leader's lap 154.
Oh, I think that was driver brain fade, driver mistake. I was pinched. I pinched it a little bit in the corner, and later Rick Mears said, "Oh yeah, you got to watch the wind blows through the stands there, and it'll kind of the wind got it." And I just got it in a little low and pinched it, and maybe caught a gust of wind. I don't know, but just turned it, spun it, and glanced off the wall, and that was that.
The Mears-Johncock duel played out to a dramatic conclusion, with Johncock barely edging out the hard-charging Mears at the flag in the closest finish ever at Indy. After spending the '83 season in an uncompetitive car on the Formula One circuit, Sullivan switched back to Indy cars in 1984. Tom Sneva became the first driver to officially break the 210-mile-an-hour mark in qualifying for the pole, while Sneva's teammate Howdy Holmes and Rick Mears completed the front row. Sullivan qualified, but his original entry was pulled from the lineup in favor of a Lola obtained by team owner Doug Shearson. The new car was definitely faster, but Sullivan was forced to start 28th after qualifying on the second weekend of time trials. Race day, Sullivan quietly moved up from the rear as Mears, Sneva, and Mario Andretti battled for position up front. On lap 55, with Mears in the lead and Sullivan up to 12th place, Patrick Bedard lost control coming out of turn 3. Bedard flipped and rolled through the short chute into the 4th turn grass, where he finally came to a stop. The yellow caution lights came on. The field packed up. And on lap 57, with the yellow still on, Sullivan was knocked out of contention.
Teo Fabi, he hit the brakes and he locks up. Arrow hit the brakes and locked up trying to miss Fabi, and he closed the gap right there. And I hit the brakes, and it was just that chain reaction, that accordion effect, and I couldn't stop, and I rode over Guerrero's wheel, and it broke the front suspension, broke the wheel and part of the front suspension. And I actually did more damage than we thought, because we had to send the chassis back to England to have one of the pickup points. But, you know, and it's one of those racing accidents, you know. It's my fault because I did it, but, you know, you're also told by all the old-timers, all the veterans, the guys, like when we're in the meeting now, you got to pack up, you got to pack up, you got to get in the pack as quick as possible. And yet you're trying to, and then somebody stops in front of you, and then because they only had one lane, I couldn't, there was a marshal there, I couldn't swerve and go off to the left to miss the, you know, the jam up. So that put us out of there.
Rick Mears went on to win his second Indy for Roger Penske. And despite his short appearance, Danny Sullivan caught Penske's interest. Sullivan finished the 1984 season with 3 wins for Doug Shearson, but would be with a new team in 1985. In 1985, Danny Sullivan accepted an offer to become the 3rd driver on a Roger Penske team that already featured Al Unser Sr. and Rick Mears. For Sullivan, it was an excellent chance to break in with a top-notch team.
I think it was a great opportunity for me. I think it was a very tough decision because I'd had such a good run with Shearson. And Doug's a good guy, and everybody at the team, we made a nice relationship there. And you're like, boy, you know, that's tough when you've won 3 races, but I had my reasons for, you know, leaving, not least of which is the fact that Roger's got the best record at Indianapolis, and for any driver in America or IndyCar racing, one race you really want to win. I mean, there's a lot of races you want to win, but the one that really makes your career complete is to win the Indianapolis 500, and I figured that was my best opportunity.
Penske's talented trio of drivers and big-budget operation couldn't match the speeds posted by pole sitter Pancho Carter or number 2 qualifier Scott Brayton, but they weren't very far behind. Al Unser secured the 7th starting with times in the 2:10 range. Rick Mears took the 10th spot with 2:09. And Danny Sullivan nearly caught the elder Unser to take 8th position at 210.298 miles per hour. Despite his quick average, Sullivan had modest hopes for race day.
I never really believed the first year that I really had a chance to win Indy. Of course, I'd had 2 bad races there. And my big turn, and all I kept telling myself was, I would like to finish in the top 3. First time out, just work yourself into it, learn from these guys.
It is that time, and here to give the traditional command is the chairman of the board of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Mr. Tony Allman.
Pole sitter Pancho Carter and single lap record holder Scott Brayton led the field over fast but unproven Buick stock blocks. But it was Bobby Rahal from the outside of the front row taking the early lead with Mario Andretti, Brayton, and Carter in close pursuit. After only 6 laps, Carter was out. And after 19, second fastest qualifier, Brayton was out as well. Rahal was out. Andretti was in the lead, and Sullivan was struggling to stay in the top 10.
The car wasn't handling quite right, and we took a chance and pitted out of step with everybody else to adjust the car. And in fact, I came out, I was only 2.5 seconds in front of Mario to go down, and came all the way back around and caught him. And that was what set the stage for what later went on to be the famous spin.
Coming back from nearly 40 seconds behind, Sullivan worked his way up to 5th place, gaining about 1 second per lap on leaders Andretti, Emerson Fittipaldi, and Tom Sneva. Just after the halfway point, Fittipaldi, Sneva, and Sullivan all made pit stops. With a superior stop, Sullivan returned to the track just 4 seconds behind Andretti. Sullivan worked every inch of the track, diving low in the turns, doing anything to catch up. Then on lap 119, after a miscommunication with the pits, Sullivan attempted a pass with no luck. Thinking that there were only 20 laps to go, he tried again, passed Andretti, and then spun almost immediately. Amazingly, Andretti avoided contact, and Sullivan was able to regain control and continue. Andretti was not impressed.
He didn't have me well enough before we got to the corner, so I didn't really leave him extra room. I figured, well, let him worry about it, but he had a full apron to use, and I thought it would be very unlikely for him to do that because of how bumpy that area was. And but he chose to do that, and it's fair enough. Could have taken both of us out. You know, it's happened before. But we were both very lucky.
Looking at the film in retrospect, it was obviously our day, and to Danny's everlasting credit, that was the first thing he said when people asked him about it is, you know, hey, I just closed my eyes, and when I opened them up, I was pointed in the right direction. I suppose there's a lot of drivers that say, well, I skillfully saved that little jewel, but the truth came out.
Sullivan's spin brought out the yellow caution lights, giving him a chance to pit for fresh tires and a chance to catch his breath. But on the restart, Sullivan had another near miss, this time avoiding a first-turn accident involving Howdy Holmes, Rich Vogler, and Tom Sneva. Andretti held the lead under the yellow, but when the race resumed, Sullivan challenged again. On lap 140, heading into turn 1, Sullivan dropped low to pass, as he did when he spun. This time, the pass was successful, and Sullivan was in the lead. While racing under the green flag, Sullivan was definitely faster than Andretti, but several yellows kept it close. John Paul Jr. crashed on lap 170. Lap 193, Bill Whittington crashed in turn 3 with Sullivan still in the lead. Under the pack-up rule, Andretti was able to stay close. But Sullivan was up to the challenge, crossing the finish line 2.5 seconds ahead of Andretti for his first Indianapolis win. For Sullivan, the impact of the Indy 500 was not felt immediately.
I think for me, it really took me about a month to realize everything. I mean, sure, instantly you're wrapped up in the hoopla, and you're swept off your feet, and you're in this interview, and you're in that interview, and everything. And the next morning you do all the talk shows, and then you go, you know, we went to New York, and we got these press conferences, but you're kind of swept into it, and you're a little bit numb by it all. And I can remember it was, I don't know, 3 weeks, a month later or something. I was someplace I'd been on the road ever since I won the race, and I was just standing in a shower, and I'm thinking to myself, and you're just like, wow, you know, I really did this.
Defending 500 champion Danny Sullivan came back strong for 1986. Posting a quick 215-plus average in time, Sullivan just missed taking the pole position. That honor went to teammate Rick Mears. Expectations from the Penske organization were high going into race day, but the Penske dominance never transpired. Michael Andretti shot out to the early lead while Mears and Sullivan had their problems. While Sullivan struggled, Mears straightened out his problems to 76 laps. But it was Bobby Rahal getting the jump after a late race yellow and passing Mears and Kevin Kogan to win in the closest 1-2-3 finish ever at Indy. Sullivan finished 9th. 1987, the new Penske cars were somewhat disappointing. Sullivan qualified in one, but the car was later withdrawn in favor of a year-old March. With the March, Sullivan posted the 6th fastest time in the field. He would start 16th. By lap 30, Sullivan was up to 5th place, and by the 60-lap mark, he was in the hunt for the lead. Then on lap 80, he spun through turn 4, and for the second time in 3 years, Sullivan kept it going.
There used to be a little bump down there, and I got it down a little low and was trying to make up some time, and got it down too low and hooked it coming out of the deal. Big Al was the funniest one. He came to me afterwards, "How do you do that?" He said, "Every time I do that, I hit something."
History would not repeat itself, however, as Sullivan developed engine trouble later and dropped out at 160 laps. He was running 3rd at the time. The Penske team continued to dominate Indy in 1988 as all 3 drivers landed on the front row. Al Unser qualified first to take the pole temporarily. Danny Sullivan knocked from the top spot with an even better run. But Rick Mears topped them all, taking the pole position. Mears won the battle of the time trials, but when it was time to race, Danny Sullivan had the edge. Ahead of his teammates and everyone else, Sullivan was clearly the class of the field. But as Mears worked out his problems, Sullivan began developing trouble with his front end. And after leading 91 laps, Sullivan's day was over when he hit the wall on lap 102. It was a devastating blow.
There wasn't anybody that could touch us that day. And for a race car driver to get his car so right on a day and dominate so much in the first part of the race and then have something break on the car, is just the most frustrating feeling I think that you can have, because you knew it was right there for you.
Sullivan's frustration continued in the 1989 season. 2 days before qualifications, he was making a practice run when the engine cover ripped off, sending Sullivan hard into the third turn wall. The car was destroyed, and Sullivan broke his right forearm. It looked as if he would miss the '89 race. But within 1 week, Sullivan was fitted with a special cast, and he was cleared to qualify on the second weekend of time trials. Driving a backup car with limited practice and only one good arm, Sullivan qualified. That he was able to drive at all was a tribute to his excellent physical condition.
I think his image is more the playboy, Hollywood jet setter, and I know there's still a big influence in that area. But, you know, the guy's a lot stronger athlete than most people give him credit for, and he takes the sport a lot more serious than some people would think. And I don't think I realized that until just recently, that he's a lot more sincere about his preparation for the sport than you'd think by looking at it, the Hollywood.
Sullivan started 26th, but actually moved up to 15th position before mechanical problems forced him out at 41 laps. Dedicated to the sport of auto racing, but realistic about its limitations, Sullivan knows that his driving career could end any time.
What I've tried to do is try to prepare myself as much as I could for the future, and because the end of your racing career, you never really know where it'll come. And I don't mean that in a bad sense about getting hurt, but all of a sudden you can have a bad year, not be winning some races. Next thing you know, somebody's not offering you a contract, and 2 or 3 years down the line, you can't get a ride. And you know, it's happened to some of the best. And so the idea is to try to kind of control a little bit of my own destiny so that maybe I can dictate when I want to stop.
From his IndyCar debut in 1982, Danny Sullivan was never afraid of success. With the intense desire to be the best and a knack for self-promotion, he quickly gained the attention of fans, drivers, and car owners.
Sullivan is a tremendous driver. He has done for us, in fact, for the sport. I think Andretti, when he came into IndyCar racing as a world champion, he brought one element. When Sullivan came in and he had this image of a playboy, etc., Danny quickly understood that he had to put the numbers on the board, and he did that. And Danny is intense. When the car's right, there's nobody any quicker. There's no question. He's very quick, whether it be on an oval or a road course.
You know, the image I can't a whole lot about, and fortunately people want to see that, and they want to believe that that's there. And that doesn't mean that I don't have a good time and have some good friends, and I think all of us like to go to a good party every now and again. But I think the people that really work for me, I mean, I'm fairly intense on the racing. I mean, that's what I really want to do. That's what I want to be remembered as. I mean, I talked earlier about the acting and all that sort of stuff. That's great, but I just want to win some more races and some more championships.
In a race few have won and fewer still become legends, Danny Sullivan made his mark at the Indy 500, a race for heroes.